When I was growing up, my auntie, who was a great aunt and effectively my grandmother, when she would look around and see things falling apart, she would exclaim, "Why, the world is going to hell in a handbasket." Whether that was about her own life or something she was observing or the world condition in general. I grew up with that phrase. And today, it's easy to look at the news. Maybe you're a consumer like I sometimes am, try to be mindful and careful, but I am a consumer of constantly negative news, yes. And I try to remember a different aphorism that I picked up in my life. You may remember this from passing through the 60s. Oh, wait, is it too late to say I heard somebody say this about the 60s? Yeah, no, I'm busted already. That the phrase that I remember is, "Relax, man, just go with the flow." Well, that might sound like a laid-back kind of response to life, but when we look at this deeply, this is a phrase that can contain infinite wisdom and a deep and powerful, if subtle, truth for us to follow. When we are in the midst of challenging circumstances in our own lives, we can become separated from the truth that is comforting, the truth that can guide and direct us in our path, the truth that transcends whatever is going on around us or within us. It is extremely helpful if we can keep a hold of and fully embrace this idea, this concept of flow, the flow of the eternal power of life, the flow of the divine essence moving in the world, every circumstance in my life, all of its conditions, subtle but powerful, to be in the flow of God life, no matter what's going on around me. Exactly. Now, in my awareness, that turn of phrase, to go with the flow, showed up in the 60s when I was still youthful. But it emanates from a much earlier place in history because it may sound like a cultural aphorism, a slang saying, but it is a powerful and deep truth, and it was also written about by a Roman emperor in the 3rd century who compiled writings called the Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. And he wrote about this flow of life and happiness and our thoughts and how that had sway over the life that showed up, that we lived, how we expressed. And he surmised that being in the flow was a natural condition. If we got out of the way, things could move according to a divine flow, an essence of truth. And even earlier than that, in the writings of Lao Tzu, 600 BC, 2,600 years ago and more, Lao Tzu, Chinese philosopher, wrote, "The human spirit has its source in the divine fountain." Okay, everybody fountain up with me right now. I am in the movement of the divine fountain, which must be permitted to flow freely throughout mankind. Anyone who flows as life flows has solved the enigma of human existence, needs no other power. To be in the flow is everything. Little sidebar. Lao Tzu continues, anything that blocks the flow of creative action is error. And everything is healthy that flows with the universe. I'm signing up right now to flow with the universe. This truth principle has stood the test of time. This is how we rely on it as a great truth because the principle doesn't change. We might be swirling around all this idea and trapped in the eddies and the whirlpools of this flow of stream of life. We may have decided we would be better up on dry land and we take ourselves out of the flow, but this divine flow moves constantly. It is an uninterrupted stream of truth And all we have to do is consciously be in connection with this flow. Doesn't that sound simple? All we have to do is put our feet in the stream of divine flow and remember that we can have an effective life in that flow no matter what we're dealing with. No matter how we're frustrated or frightened and scared by the world conditions, no matter how our life seems to have fallen apart at this very moment, it is possible to flow together in connection with this power and presence of the divine movement of God itself in the universe and in our lives. When we are in that flow, we all know it, right? We know what it's like to be in that space, even when it's interrupted, seemingly, in our experience. We know that ease, that grace, that movement, that everything is just going your way and life is easy. Now, I'm here to tell you, having had lots of experiences in my decades, that life does not always show up in easy and pleasant ways. It is still possible to anchor in this truth and be in the flow of God. I've not always been in that space. Sometimes you just truly have to be where you are in the midst of whatever pain and challenge or trouble or difficulty and allow yourself to be fully present to that. So it's the vehicle of letting it pass through you. A psychologist friend of mine used to remind me regularly that emotions are not permanent situations. If we will fully feel and let pain, sorrow, sadness, anything that feels uncomfortable, if we will allow it to be present within us and to be permeable through us, not take up permanent residence, but allow that to just flow through. It was her contention that emotion really doesn't need to last more than about 20 minutes. And I am so grateful that I came to this piece of wisdom when I was in the process of grieving my husband's death a number of years ago. That I could sit with whatever had me in tears, whatever had me immobilized, and be present to that. And then I could find that way to move back into the flow of life, whether that was prayer, whether that was uplifting music. Boy, do I wish I'd known this song, Take Heart, earlier in my experience. But I did have musicians that lifted me into a place where I could confront whatever it was I was in the midst of from a different consciousness than the pain, the sorrow, the grieving. Because you are probably aware, as I am, that we can't deal with the problem from the level of the problem. We need something that lifts us outside of ourselves, outside of the difficulty, that we transcend this place that we are in so that we can catch a vision. We can use this power of imagination that we celebrate in the month of June to envision a different future than where we stand right now. We may have to process through where we are, but we can also, at the same time, create a vision that carries us forward. I have come to love the power of the phrase, both and. Because I'm going to be dealing with whatever it is that I might not be liking. And I have the resources, the strength, the power, the energy. I can find those in this flow of life to move me through whatever difficulty I may be in. Amen. Yeah. There's a legend of an Eastern monarch that's told that he was plagued with worries and harassed at every turn by the conditions in his kingdom that he had to deal with, and he was fed up. So he called those wise counselors together and said, look, I can't focus to deal with what I need to do because the worry just has me overwhelmed. I need you to give me some magical incantation to quell the worries so that I can deal with what confronts our country. I'm not lost in the distress. Now, this must be a brief phrase because I want it engraved on a signet ring so that it is always right here in front of my eyes. It must be appropriate to every situation and condition that I have to deal with so that I can move through the adversities that face our kingdom. It must be wise and endlessly enduring. That's what we would call a divine principle, words of truth. And that monarch wanted these words which would guide all of his life through this simple phrase. Who wouldn't want such a powerful resource? And so he made this request to his counselors. Well, he was the monarch, so you know it was a command. And so they hustled off, debated, reasoned. They probably prayed seriously and came back to give him this secret engraved on the ring that would always remind him of the larger truth. The words engraved on that ring, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. Deep wisdom about this flow of life and energy and movement of situations and conditions that we find ourselves in that need not be permanent. We don't have to set up the tent in the field of that which is painful or uncomfortable, or we wish we weren't in the midst of it. We don't have to build the condo to move into. We just need to pass through it and take its lessons and complete the journey, because the journey in this flow of life continues. It moves on, and we need the release of moving through it so that we can use this power of imagination to envision that new life. I don't know about your auntie, but mine was full of lots of wisdom. Some other things she might have said, or my mother, or maybe my therapist, your minister definitely, might advise this: to know that any pain you are in can be temporary. There is no timetable for moving through things. Just know that we do move through things and move forward. That we can envision a life beyond where we are standing right now. If we feel stuck and mired and overwhelmed by any of our own life circumstances, or God knows the condition in the world this particular week, we can envision something different. My auntie always said, be grateful for where you are and what you have, because gratitude is the lubrication for the wheels of life to bring you more generosity, more peace, more harmony, more kindness, more love. It's especially helpful to focus on those things that you have control over. I still have the illusion once in a while that that means absolutely everything and everybody, but I know better. Focus on what I can do and where I can make forward movement, and know that this flow of life will carry me forward in those areas where I am momentarily stuck. And when you are stuck, when you are in that wave of overwhelm, write it out. Maybe you can hold the vision of being on a surfboard, a paddleboard, on a canoe. Whatever, you can ride the crest of the wave, because the wave swells up under you, carries you along, and it subsides. Ride those waves until they pass, because they do. Practice self-care in whatever way nurtures you. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be simple. It needs to be simple, just like that signet ring. Needs to be something that comes right to you, to your awareness, as a reminder. Okay, yeah, I know how to cope in this moment right now. It can be as simple as taking a deep breath in, holding it for a few seconds, and very slowly letting it out, emptying your body all the way out. And imagine that the next breath in is the infilling of God's light, loving energy, and truth. And you hold that till it's anchored, and then you release, and the out-breath carries away anything that does not match that vibration. Anything that is not true and whole and harmonious and loving is carried away on your out-breath. And remember that you are not in this journey alone. Reach out. Reach out to friends, family. Get support. Get nourishment from the relationships that you have around you. Especially turn to spirit by whatever means you connect most deeply with the presence of God. Inhale that into your life, into your being. This life that we have, this is a flowing experience. And sometimes as we are in the midst of it, it can be so difficult to have perspective, to find meaning in the circumstances that we are in. But if we can step back and look from a perspective where we take it all in, we can see that this moment, this situation, this thing I'm dealing with, what confronts me right now, is a moment of my lifespan. And we forget that this is but a chapter, that life continues beyond the edges of what we can see and imagine right now. That there, I believe, for each one of us, there is a cheerleading squad, much like that Monarch's Wise Counsel group. We have a group of wise counselors who have left the physical plane, moved on into spirit, and are waiting for us to be attuned to the flow of life so that they can be our wise voice of counselor, so they can be our cheering squad when we need it, when we are in those moments of being undone and overwhelmed. So if there is someone that sits on your shoulder, welcome and embrace them and their presence. The auntie I mentioned, my granny, if you will, she's one of those voices for me. And I sometimes imagine that I hear her voice. My parents, not so much. I don't have that energy attachment or that energy flow with my own parents who are in spirit. And my husband, well, he just laughs at me. He just chuckles. And that chuckle is a reminder to get back in the flow, girl. Stop messing about. I taught you enough physics that you know how this works. Well, he didn't, but I do know that the flow of life is an unimpeded energy path for our lives, for our good. When this good life seems out of our grasp, we simply remember all we have to do is reconnect. We let go of whatever has us troubled, disconcerted, out of sorts, frightened. We let go and we allow the movement of God to carry us in this unending stream. I think many of us in our new thought and spiritual journey have gotten a little bit stuck in the place where we interact with prayer and God as though it were a cosmic vending machine. Guilty? And there's a place for that, knowing that we are held and guided and lifted and healed and nurtured at every turn. But it isn't because we ask God to do something for us and we have earned that. It isn't that as we make our plea, our request, our prayer, God hears and answers in any real way. What makes prayer powerful is when we understand that what is taking place is our words are bringing us into this flow, into alignment with the bigger truth than where we stand right now. It is the energy of prayer that can help us transcend the challenge we're in at the moment. Give us that distant vision, that creative future idea that helps us, calls us forward into our next expression, into our next movement of life. When we are in this space of attached to the flow of life, we can be effective at dealing with whatever we are. And we remember, this too shall pass. When I fall apart, it is pretty simple to flow back together into the energy of God, even in the midst of sorrow, especially in the midst of the challenge and the difficulty. Know that you are in the space of both and. You are dealing with the situation, and the life of God is in you, around you, through you, as you, in every moment. Let that be the swell of energy on which you ride through life. And try to remember that whatever tension and strain and worry, like the monarch, simply interrupts that flow momentarily. And it will impact your ability to stay connected to a greater truth. Know that you will experience that tension and that difficulty, and know that you are able to reconnect with a simple thought of turning to God, to take heart, to know that this too shall pass. When I was a child, I swear I have wanted to drive. I love a car. I love driving. I love everything about driving. And I believe I first thought about wanting to drive when I was 5 years old. Every week, my parents and I, my brothers were a generation older than me, so we would go and visit my brother in another town about an hour's drive away. We had a big sedan, and you maybe remember a car in the 50s. Many of them still do, but bench seat in the front, and it had a flip-down armrest for the comfort of the driver and the passenger. Well, that armrest, don't tell anybody, that was my child's seat in the car, the front car of our sedan when I was little. That tells you a little bit about my age. And I would sit and watch and talk with my parents all the way to Chelan, from Wenatchee to Chelan in Washington. And sometimes I could talk my dad into letting me sit on his lap and help him drive. I got that privilege for about 5 miles. And then I would be back on the seat. And this route had a tunnel along the way. We drove up a hill, went into the tunnel, came out the other side. And my dad one day realized that as we approached that tunnel, I would go and put my head behind his shoulder because I didn't like the darkness in the tunnel. And I was okay sleeping in my bedroom at night. I did not have monsters under my bed. I didn't need a nightlight. But that tunnel, there was something unnerving about that. And one day my dad said, Margie, just concentrate. The light is right on the other side of the tunnel, and you can see it. You can go through the tunnel knowing you come out in the light on the other side. Holy scamoli, I did not know my father at that age. I did not know my father was a spiritual philosopher. We all travel through the tunnels, the dark tunnels of life. But when we know that that light is on the other side, and we will find it, we will pass through the tunnel, we can be in that space of both and. We can find the comfort that we need to face into the dark tunnel of our own experiences. 23rd Psalm can be a powerful scripture. Yea, though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I think the most important word in that whole passage is through. Yep, I might be in the valley of death. Yep, I might be in the tunnel, but it is a walk through to the other side. And when I have the confidence of knowing I can come out the other side on the flow of God's light and love, the valley is ahead, I can be confident about my ability to get in the through process. I don't have to pitch a tent in the valley. I don't have to stay stuck in the tunnel. As I grew, it's probably no more than a few months or a year, because pretty soon I couldn't sit in that armrest child seat sort of affair in the front of our sedan. But after I got that idea that I could celebrate the dark because the light was right there, I would go through the tunnel, touching the headliner of the car and squealing with some delight. I might have been chasing some monsters away too, but I was a squeal and delight kind of child. When you are facing a tunnel experience, one that seems overpowering, just know the light is on the other side. You cannot be separated from this flow that is God, that is good. And what interrupts it is our getting invested in the journey of sorrow, of pain, of difficulty, of trouble, of turmoil. Breathe and release yourself from that. Choose to find a different experience. In the book of James, first chapter, verses 2 through 4, it's recorded words of our elder brother and master teacher. Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet various trials, for you know that the testing of your faith produces your steadfastness. And let that steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Another translation says, don't run from our tests and our hardships, brothers and sisters. As difficult as they may be, you will find joy on the other side. You will get to the finish line, mature, complete, and wanting nothing. So this is our journey. To know that life is going to bring us circumstances that cause us to fall apart. And it is so possible, some days easy to remember, that the flow of God, the flow of life, always has a hold of us. Whether we are conscious or not, we can flow together in the next moment in the midst of whatever is in our lives. We can be perfect and complete, lacking nothing in this energy of God. Thank you. Thank you for the journey of wholeness, of passing through things that we don't have to hold on to, that we can take the richness of life from these experiences and move into the light that leads us forward. Take a deep breath with me, if you will. And I invite you to imagine, if you close your eyes or just sit there with them relaxed, find that inner space within you where you know this truth, even if it seems elusive at this moment. And right now, imagine that your feet are on the edge of a flowing stream. It's gently moving past, and you recognize your wholeness, your well-being is calling you to step into this stream, and your feet enter gently into this soothing water, this softly moving current, and it's easy to walk on the stream bed. And you stand out in the middle, allowing that water to just flow around you until you are nourished and replenished and lifted, encouraged, empowered. And feeling that sense of God everywhere around and within you, you fall gently back into that stream and just allow yourself to be carried along. You let go of anything that would separate you from the truth of your own divine self. You let yourself be carried gently in the current, in the flow of this infinite life. There may be eddies, there may even be whirlpools along in this stream, but you know how to navigate through those back to the center where God and good and life simply move you along gently. From time to time, you may need a little break, and you choose to let yourself be guided to the shore so that you can rest. But you keep your feet in that water, always in the stream that is God, that is wholeness, that is peace. And when ready, we enter the stream fully again to be carried, to be swept along gently in harmony with the life that we are here to live. Allow this stream and its energy always to be present in your inner mind and inner understanding, that you may be indeed flowing together even when life falls apart. And we hold that feeling of being buoyed by the presence of God in the silence.